Well, for more insight into China's economic data, we're joined by Elinar Tangen, current affairs commentator out of Beijing, and Dan McClory, president and head of China at Boustead and Company. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rachelle.
Now, Einar, I'm going to start with you. Let's start by taking a look at China's third quarter GDP growth, which held steady at 6.7%, in line with expectations. So give us a breakdown of what this means in terms of the overall health of China's economy.
Well, after 37 years of a managed economy, China has shown it's been very adept at getting results over a long period of time, despite tremendous amount of negative ideas about what's going to happen next in China. And you tend to see that throughout the news entity. But there are definitely bright spots. Consumption is one of them. But manufacturing is a worry, but it is in line with this idea that they're trying to reduce capacity, both in housing and in manufacturing. So those numbers are looking very good. Debt is an issue, especially corporate debt, which has climbed to very, very high levels and continues to go forward. There's been a lot of banking activity this last quarter, and it remains to be seen how the Chinese government is going to continue to manage these issues. There needs to be some reforms, a continuation of the kind of opening up that has been prominent under Li, reducing regulation and these types of things.
Now, I'd like to bring in Dan here. How will this latest data affect the investment landscape in China and with foreign investors, do you think?
Well, I think foreign investors are increasingly looking for opportunities to access the China market. Here in New York, we've seen a couple examples of that. Yesterday, we had a company called Shineco that was at the NASDAQ. It's kind of a Fitbit that meets traditional Chinese medicine. And so foreign investors are investing in U.S.-listed Chinese companies. There's a company called Yangtze River Development, which is coming to market next month, a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure play in Wuhan at the beginnings of the One Belt, One Road initiative. So I think we're seeing it in different ways, not necessarily direct investment into the country. We're seeing ways to access China growth in securities that perhaps may be available outside of China.
And Einar, with this steady growth that we're seeing, what does that mean in terms of the government's reforms and their fiscal policies going forward?
Well, that's one of the big issues. You're seeing the government starting to move in, especially in the property market, to kind of rein in this, what they perceive as could be turned into a bubble. I mean, the massive increases year on year of number of units being sold and also the pricing is very worrying. Remember, you do have median income and you do have median housing prices. They should be somewhat aligned. Now, in China, it's a little bit different because of the one-child policy, where you have 8 grandparents, 4 parents, and 2 individuals, so there can be a wealth transfer mechanism. But there's got to be some way of kind of ironing it out. The other issue is debts. Both local governments, we've seen last week how they started implementing this idea of debt for equity swaps, especially to help alleviate large and medium income enterprises who have gotten themselves in a pickle with too much short-term expensive borrowing. So there's a lot of work to be done. Banking is a big issue. The large banks have been very slow to move into the small and medium-sized enterprise area where 80% of the new jobs are being done. But even more importantly, it's this idea of new metrics. Too often, people have always just concentrated on GDP numbers. But I think it's more useful when looking at China to look at these employment numbers. You mentioned 10 million jobs in the first 3 quarters. Remember, the target was only 10 million for the year. And then you start looking at some of these other issues beyond that in terms of the growth of consumption, driven economy. How sustainable will that be? It's looking good because of the way the population is shifting, that it will continue. So these are the kinds of things that the government is looking at and will continue to try to encourage.
And Dan, as we look at this holistic picture, as we said, as Einar was saying, not just focusing on the GDP number, we can also look at what domestic consumers are doing. They really showed their impact of their spending power on China's economy. How sustainable do you think this consumer enthusiasm is?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly sustainable. I'm going to disagree with the last comments that we heard here. I think we tend to focus too much on this percentage of GDP that's coming from consumer spending. Let's go to the basic root level. There's about $5 trillion of household income in China right now that's documented and reported. Perhaps 30% more that isn't. That's how you consume. That's how you consume for the long term. And the most interesting statistic coming out of consumption was in the discretionary categories. You know, things you don't need but you like. And this could be recreation, this could be automobiles, this could be other things such as education even comes into that basket. So I think those are very encouraging signs for a sustainable long-term growth in consumer spending. And remember, China, unlike many developing countries, and especially Southeastern Asian nations, has had an invest first policy. So it has emphasized investing in infrastructure with its own money, not with expensive foreign debt. So as a result, consumer spending is playing catch up as a percentage of that GDP, but it's an intense number, and we think it's growing quite strongly.
Now, Einar, I do want to bring you in. I know that you touched on some of the issues in the housing market, and we know that the government has really taken steps to try and cool the market and especially curb that speculative buying that we're seeing. How much of an impact do you think that's going to have on the broader Chinese economy?
Well, the real estate market has a massive impact, especially when you get into the issue of construction and all the related industries and economic multipliers. So the government has been playing a very, very careful game where they make sure that they stimulate enough to keep the numbers where they need them to be. I do think that they're looking at income per person and the growth of that, especially disposable income and jobs. I'm going to disagree with my colleague on that. I think those are the kind of metrics that people are looking for. Yes, discretionary income is there, but it really is all about disposable income and its growth. So in terms of going forward, the government is going to continue on the policy of careful management. Like I said, 37 years of management so far this year, coming up to 2017. This is a very, very important indicator of how China is able to manage its economy.
Certainly lots to explore in the world's second largest economy. My thanks to Elinar Tangen, current affairs commentator, and McClory, president and head of China at Boustead and Company. Thank you.